ready.
All right, so go ahead, Rebecca. I know we've kind of been in these declaration sessions about halfway through, and we've talked about things like freedom and fear and motivation and resilience, defiance. Today we really dove into just, advancing ourselves. What have you seen has kind of transformed and changed in these past 6 weeks for you?
Well, in all of our strategy sessions, I always feel like I'm rising. So always that. And it's like it's like being lifted out of the fog, the clouds of my own day's thinking. And so whatever the topic is that we're discussing on the week that we're on, I always find that it elevates me to a place where I have a stronger sense of who I actually am. And so, I essentially, I think what's happened is I've let go of my fears. I feel more connected with my my divinity, my own connection with divinity. Uh, I'm no longer quite so entrapped and enmeshed in these old psychological systems that I felt like I didn't know how to get out of
Hmm.
before, like with my ex-husband, for example, or even with my dynamics with my children. And so I think in our time together over these past 6 weeks specifically, mm, I think it's really specifically, I think what it's helped me do is get connected more with my more playful, lighthearted, sort of pure sense of self. And and then as a result, like it's allowing me to connect more purely with the people I'm trying to serve, like my ideal clients, as well as in my content and creation, being able to do it from a more playful place, not being so serious. So ironically, as you've posed these questions and these concepts to me, and even though it sort of makes me think, uh, the thoughts are elevated thoughts, and as a result, the I feel less defined by my thoughts, right? Like I feel less attached to my thinking and more connected with my felt sense of being unified and whole. And so, yeah, and I think that possibly part of what that is too is, we've talked about intentionality and the energy that radiates from that. I feel like before I was living life more from an outside in perspective. And even though like I wouldn't have said I think I
Hmm.
was still sort of in a sense taking care of my image related to sort of people who are far away from the center, in a sense creating more of a like priority there. Whereas now it is core to extremities focused, so that core of self of me, which is a large part of what that is an old habit of forgetting me. So I think our sessions, what they've allowed me to do is to remember me
Hmm.
and the intentionality I want to bring to my voice and how I'm expressing myself and my gifts to the world and how that gets generated and um, yeah, and experienced. And so now that I'm remembering me and putting intentionality around me and how I want to show up in this world, then that impacts my energy, which of course impacts the people who are closest to me, and then gets felt even beyond that. So I would say that's what I've gotten out of it.
Beautiful. Now, if you were to give somebody who's thinking about, signing up with Coach and Brain, what would you say would that experience be like for them?
Mhm. So if you're somebody who's looking for a coach who's going to bring you closer to your authentic self, somebody who is going to listen from where you're coming from while also asking more of you, that to me is the cycle that Embry is going to bring you on. So she's going to connect with you and who you actually are, what you value, what you believe in, what's important to you. She's going to connect with that. And then she's going to listen. She's going to hear. She has this great, essentially, Coach Ambreen has this great capacity to be very tuned into what's real and what is sort of old cognitive dysfunction. I think is maybe a good way to put it. But, essentially like old beliefs that aren't serving you, like they're not serving your highest good, right? So in a sense, instead of just seeing you as a sort of psychological makeup and, just like through a lens of just pure psychology, she's looking at you as a spiritual entity. And so that resonance of what's real versus the resonance and sort of the depleting energy of that false self, she has a really great sense of distinguishing between those two. And so I don't think I've ever expressed something from a more, in a sense, I've never expressed something that's energetically inferior or energetically depleted or energetically not tuned into my authentic integrity. Like if my old patterns come up,
Mhm.
she always calls me on it and brings me back to, okay, let's come back to like, who is Rebecca? Like, what does she value? And so she has a great sixth sense for the things that don't align. Let's put it that way. She's a great sixth sense of what doesn't align with your truest, authentic, integrated self. And she doesn't shy away from calling you on stuff. So I think to me, if you're looking for a coach who's going to help you truly align with your integrated, authentic self, she's really phenomenal at what she does.
And if there was anything that Coach and Brain could do differently to meet you where you want to be met, what would that be?
Hmm. Different. Honestly, it's a hard question for me to answer just because, I personally come from a philosophy where I believe that, every person, every coach has their unique sort of style and like fingerprint in a sense. So it's a hard question to answer because not that you can't improve, of course you can, but in a sense, I wouldn't want you to change who you are. So as far as like what you could do differently, well, I think on a practical level, I remember when I first started the program, it's funny because when I first started the program, you had said, so, and I think it was literally like in the sales call, and you had said something like, there's some optional weekly worksheets that you can do.
Mhm.
And so my brain just said optional. Right. And so like, in our time together, I've literally probably done like three of the worksheets, largely because in my brain they were optional. Like I never had this sense that like they were a key component to the process. Even if along the way you said, it's a really good idea if you do these, and wouldn't that help if you did these? My brain had already locked into them being optional. So um, I don't know if you could unchange that. So I think on a very practical level, I just recommend that if you feel that they're instrumental and they're
Mhm.
critical in the coaching journey, then don't use the word optional. You could say something along the lines of, supporting homework, like I wouldn't have minded if I thought
Mhm.
that there was homework every week. I'd been like, okay, there's homework every week. And I just would have done it. Right.